Hey, it's a half hour later than usual, but we are here and we are live for the Panther-Lair Show. Hopefully you are as well right here on youtube.com/Panther-Lair.com. I'm Chris Peak from Panther-Lair.com, Panther-Lair.com, Pittsburgh.rivals.com. The most comprehensive source of Pitt sports news on the internet, football, basketball, and recruiting. You find it all at Panther-Lair.com and message boards interact with hundreds and thousands of your closest Pitt fan friends all day, every day. Panther-Lair.com, Pittsburgh.rivals.com, where Pitt fans are hanging out. They're hanging out there right now. Hopefully they head over here and hang out soon, but they are hanging out there. And if you go on the message boards at Panther-Lair.com right now, you're going to find a lot of conversations happening, a lot of people interacting with each other. So go check that out. If you're a Pitt fan, you want to be part of the conversation. Of course, our YouTube channel right here, youtube.com/Panther-Lair.com. It's a place we do our Pitt video content, our daily morning Pitt shows, Monday through Friday, every day of the week. Our weekly live show, which is this thing right here, every Wednesday night at 8 p.m. This week we had to push it back to 8:30 for a reason I will tell you in a second. And then our post-game shows. We do them after every football game, and we do them after every road basketball game. So we didn't do one at like 2 a.m. last night after the Florida State game. We're not going to do one after after the NC State game on this Saturday. But all the ACC tournament games, everything that comes after that, we will be live right here at youtube.com/Panther-Lair.com. So make sure you like this video and subscribe. That way you won't miss any of our Pitt video content at youtube.com/Panther-Lair.com. We've actually, that's all the morning Pitt and the live stream and the post-game shows. But we've got a ton of video content this week, stuff from practice. Everybody wants to know about the quarterbacks. We got a lot of videos of quarterbacks right now. We had a video from Monday of the quarterbacks, and that one was how long was that? That one was 7 minutes, and then we put up another video today that was another 3, almost 4 minutes. So we've had like about 12 minutes of quarterback video, which if you know how much time we actually get to watch the players playing football during spring camp, the media viewing window, 12 minutes of video is almost the entire thing that we got to watch. But look, you want to get a look at Nate Yarnell and Christian Veyer and Ty Dievenbach, plus Eli Holstein and Julian Duggar. That's the place to do it. We get a lot of video, and plus you get to see some of the receivers and the running backs. And we'll put up some video tomorrow of linemen and things like that. But lots to talk about tonight with spring camp. Lots to talk about tonight with Pitt basketball. The Panthers fresh off the win over Florida State last night, a 15-point win. And then the Boston College game, 25-point win on Saturday. Pretty good little run of games for Pitt here, certainly bouncing back from the loss at Clemson last Tuesday. So we got a lot to talk about on that front as well. And to join the conversation, of course, we bring in our good friend Jim Hammett from Panther-Lair.com. Jim, nice to see you filling up half the screen there. We've got our new format that we've been doing for a few weeks. I like it. I think it's been going well. And of course, if anybody wants to join the conversation with us, Jim, they can get in the chat screen over there on the right-hand side. I'm pointing past Jim's head over to the chat. You can, it's their right. So you have to look to your left, Jim. So it's sort of, exactly. So the chat screen over there, post your comments and questions, and we'll have a little conversation back and forth. Jim, I had to push the live stream back tonight to 8:30 because it was the first tournament game for our 5th grade basketball team. So, this is the kind of thing where, like, regular season, they don't even keep score. The kids keep score, and I think most of the time they're kind of pretty close to being right. I'm not really sure. But, tournament game, they got the scoreboard running, the clock, they're keeping actual score. You have to check in at the scorer's table, and they're keeping stats and everything. So it's pretty intense. You can actually defend in the backcourt in the final 2 minutes of the game, full court defense. I mean, like, it's the real deal. And so the kids were really fired up, and they got the win. It was like 20-16. We pulled out the win. So I'm pretty fired up right now. That's why we had to start a little late. Do you have any questions, as a post-game press conference, Jim? Do you have any questions for me about our 5th grade basketball win before we jump into talking about like Pitt stuff at all? Should I start off? Should I be like, first of all, I'm really proud of my guys. We played really hard. Really knew we had to get out there and play tough on defense. We know that team is one that's really going to attack us a lot. They're a guard-heavy team, but they got some size down low, and so we were able to really counter their size. Felt good about the rebounds, and we were able to get out and run. Defense really led to offense for us. Fell in the hole a little bit early, but We were really able to come back hard. So I'm really proud of our team's effort. I thought we had a lot of togetherness. We played with force and, feel really good going into our game on Saturday morning at 8:20. So questions.
It's funny. We were down at Virginia for one of those press conferences, and there's a Virginia writer. He's like, I just need like 2 quotes from Capel. What do you think he's going to say? And I went into that, like, really proud of my guys, really proud of our effort tonight. I thought our team played, like, I did the whole Capel thing. And the very first word he said is really proud of my team. And the guy just looked at me and started laughing. So
that's what it is. That's what it is. If it's a win, really proud of my team. If it's a loss, first of all, congrats to Clemson. That's 100% across the board. That's what is said. First of all, congrats to Syracuse. First of all, congrats to St. Francis, PA. First of all, congrats to Nicholls State. We got to dig deep for some of these losses because this team is losing less and less than teams have in the past. So I'm pretty fired up. Our 4th grade team got bounced like 2 weeks ago, but 5th grade team was able to survive in advance. Now we're going to play the number 1 seed on Saturday morning, so I'm pretty nervous about that. Going to have to work on our give and go defense and defending pick and rolls, but practice is tomorrow night. We'll focus on that then. Late game last night. First of all, 9:00 games are stupid. I don't know why they had a 9 p.m. That was terrible. I really went to bed at like 2 a.m. till we got out of the Peterson Event Center, got home. I taped a morning pit for this morning. It was really late. I don't know why there had to be a 9:00 game, and then it started later, right? Wasn't a 9:05 tip off.
Yeah.
And then they called 34 fouls and attempted 49 free throws. Like, this is not what I was looking for on a Tuesday night.
No, I've had a few of those 9:00 games. Like, I think one of those years, the ACC Big Ten Challenge, I was there with 300 other people watching them play Minnesota or something. I mean, like, the 9:00 games stink, and I don't know. I mean, it was unfortunate last night because it's such a big week for Pitt basketball. They really need these 2 games, and like that definitely killed the atmosphere a little bit. I mean, you could see it was not as crowded as it was some of those Saturday games. So it was unfortunate, but I thought they overcame it. I mean, I thought it took them a little while to get going. And, some people said it was sloppy. I think it was just them getting used to Florida State. Florida State's big. And that was one of the things Jeff Capel said. I don't think they were sloppy passes. I think they were just miscalculating that all their guys are 6'10" and they could get in their lane. So once they kind of got used to the size, it was just kind of a gradual, it was like 7 points, it was 9 points, it was 12 points. Like, they just kept going, and I thought it was a good performance by them.
Yeah, it was like, oh, your arms reach all the way out to there.
Yeah.
Oh, your arms reach all the way up that high. I had no idea that you could do that. And yeah, it was funny because like I didn't really feel like in the first half, I was like, I don't really feel like they played all that well. Or at one point, I remember turning to our friend George and being like, I don't think Pitt's playing all that well, but they're shooting like 50% and they're up 11. They're shooting 50% from 3, or they weren't shooting 50% from 3, but they were shooting 50% from the field. They just had a bunch of like turnovers, but it was those passes, like you said, where maybe they didn't anticipate what kind of length Florida State really had. The press wasn't a problem at all. And it's really remarkable. I think they turned it over one time against the press. I wrote it down. Yeah, the 2:31 mark of the first half. With 2:30 left to play in the first half, they turned it over. It was the only time they turned it over against the press. And I think they've been really good against – they haven't played a ton of teams that have pressed after made baskets, but every time they haven't really had much problem with it. I can probably count on one hand the number of times they've turned it over in those situations, which is pretty remarkable when you have freshman guards. Maybe it's a testament to sort of the growth and development of those 2 guys because, I mean, obviously we're going to talk about Blake Hinson, but like the freshman guards are playing really, really well right now. Yeah, I mean, Jalen Lowe for a while. Bub Carrington has been up and down, but I think certainly since the second half of the Virginia Tech game, he's been more up than down. And we've talked about them all season because they've had their moments, but I feel like if they're not peaking, they're continuing to ascend right now.
Yeah, and I think they've been pretty good at limiting turnovers all year, and I think that's just a sign of that they're pretty smart players and they don't take a lot of risks. And it's very unique to have 2 freshman guards that are so good at protecting the ball. I mean, I even some of those games where they lost, like that was it Wake Forest or Clemson 2 weeks ago. Like, Bub didn't have a turnover and he played like 35 minutes. Wow, like that's impressive. So yeah, I mean, Bub's been great lately. Jalen, I mean, his past 2 games, 19 assists, 29 points over 2 games. I mean, that's just tremendous. And it became apparent right away last night when they were, dealing with that length of Florida State. You can tell like, oh, Jalen can get by these guys every single time he wants, and he started to do that. He had that nice little like up and under fake, got two guys up in the air, and then had that one. And there was a couple of moments like that, but he got wherever he wanted to, and he kind of does that all the time. It's impressive that he is really quick. Like Pitt's had a lot of good guards through the years. Once you kind of think back to these, the 2000 teams, but like they've never had a guy like that good that is that quick, and it's impressive to see.
Yeah. And even Jalen's really good at like seeing when that matchup is there. Yeah, I mean, obviously, I think Jeff Capel said it last night. Those guys watch a lot of film, they do a lot of study, and I think Jalen goes into games with a pretty clear idea of like, okay, this is the thing I need to see to know that it's time for me to just take off and drive. You know what I mean? That like, oh, I've got that matchup. Oh, you're gonna switch the big onto me? Okay, goodbye. Like here I go. You're not gonna, whether it's Quentin Post or it's Philip Housing, whoever it is, like, okay, all right, you're gonna put that guy on me. Okay, I'm gonna burn him. Bub is not as quick, I don't think, but I think he can still move. He's still very crafty with how he drives. He's still really athletic with how he drives. He's able to the thing about Bub is he's able to sort of get in the air and sort of levitate for a while. You know what I mean? It really extend, almost take off from the free throw line and really sort of extend to get the ball up there and wait until the last possible moment before he flicks the ball up for the layup. In addition to the pull-up jumpers and the three-pointers and everything that he's able to do. He was only 1 of 6 from 3 last night, but what does that put him on he's 4 of 6 from from 2. So he was really effective. He had 6 rebounds. He had 4 assists and 4 turnovers, which is actually one of the most turnovers he's had in a game. I think he had 5 turnovers in the game at Syracuse when they turned the ball over a lot. But yeah, they've just been so good and better than I expected. Even when Bub got off to that hot start, I said this on the Morning Pit today after the game last night. The thing I kept thinking back to was that Florida game where all of a sudden it was like eye-opening. Like, oh, wow, this is when you play real competition. This is what it's like for freshman guards. And there was I was like, all right, they might have just hit the wall. No more of those big games because this is what's going to happen when they play good competition. When you think back to that point, when they went to Brooklyn and how they were impacted by the way those power conference teams played them, did you think they would get to where they're at now? Because I didn't. I thought I thought the ceiling would be quite a bit lower.
I did too, and I think we were kind of in our text chain earlier. I think it surprised them that they started the year so hot from 3, and that was just a big part of they were just getting any look they wanted, and they were still getting those looks and they weren't going down. And I think they struggled to figure out how to counter that. And I think one of the big things that's been able to unlock that is having a guy like Jalen Lowe who is able to go the whole way to the basket, then make a decision. I think all 3 of those guards are actually really good in tight spaces. If you think about it, when they get the whole way to the basket, they could either finish or they could pass, or there's a lot of things they could do. There's a lot of good stuff happening right there. So I think having that in Lowe has allowed them to, do more things on offense. And it's not just the Blake Hinson. And early on in the season, it was just all right, Blake takes a shot, Bub takes a shot. And that's kind of all it was. So I think they've just unlocked a whole, almost everyone's working right now. Anyone that gets in is able to score other than Jefferson. You know what? Hey, he even had a basket last night too. So, I mean, so yeah, I mean, when you're seeing Guillermo, taking step back threes and how about that drive to the basket he had too? I mean,
He went coast to coast. He went coast to coast at one point. I think he dished it off, but he went coast to coast. I mean,
he missed. He actually went the whole way and missed it. I think.
Oh, is that it? Yeah.
But whenever you have all 7 parts working, I think a good point guard is what gets you there. So I think just early on the season, they were just kind of missing what Jalen Lowe has been able to bring.
Yeah, I agree. It's been pretty remarkable. And of course, we have to talk about Blake Hinson. I mean, we can't talk about anything with this team, and certainly last night, without mentioning him. Since the Duke game, he's averaging 19.7 points per game. I mean, he's shooting, I forget, I tweeted the stats, but I mean, it's ridiculous. He's just playing at such a ridiculous level. And he's not the kind of guy who can take over a game the way that maybe like Lowe can or Leggett can, because he sort of drives, but he doesn't really drive, right? I mean, he just sort of dribbles into somebody and hopes they fall over or foul him. But when you find him and when you get him the ball, he is so deadly with the shooting, and he seems to thrive in those situations. Like last night when the game was down to 8 points and he knocks down back-to-back threes. He is just such, I mean, he's a clutch shooter, and it was remarkable to see it last year. It's remarkable to see it this year. It sort of feels like, I don't know, would you say they can go as far as he can take them? Or is that dismissing what the freshman guards are doing and the impact those guys can have?
I mean, you go back to those teams that made the tournament for Pitt, and the teams they always lost to were the ones that had really good offensive players, a guy that could carry you on a given night. And you see Pitt fans all the time tweet, they're like, the NCAA tournament deserves to have Blake Hinson. Everyone needs to see this guy. He's great, and like I mean, to a point, they're right. He would be an exciting player in that tournament. So I mean, yeah, I think they need everyone working to win in the tournament or to make the tournament. But he is the type of guy that could. What if he has one of those like 9 3-pointer games? Like he could do that in a tournament game. So and he could be the sole reason they win a game. So yeah,
well, and they've had like 4 guys who have taken over games. You know what I mean? There has been a point where Ishmael Leggett took over games and just put Pitt on his back and willed them to victory. There have been games where Bub Carrington did it. There have been games where Jalen Lowe did it, and there have obviously been a lot of games where Blake Hinson did it. Like, I think they have 4 guys who can legitimately take over a game, and like 4 guys who have to be just downright scary when you're scouting to play against Pitt, because at some point you're going to run out of ways to defend all 4, and whoever you leave is probably going to make you pay. Is this team more dangerous offensively than last year? They are, right?
I think so, but I'm thinking about last year. They had 5 guys who could probably lead the team in scoring on a given night.
Yeah, with Nike. Yeah, you're right.
Because there were a couple games where he did, and I think I mean this year is 4, but it goes back to something I said last week. This is the only team with 6 guys with 20+ made threes. They have weapons all over the floor, and all of a sudden, like Zach Austin's 3-point shot doesn't look so bad as it did earlier in the year. Like that's actually a threat you have to account for. So I don't know. I was having this conversation with Noah and Steven, like who would you take this year or last year's team, and we were kind of split on it. I mean, like I don't know. I think the joke I made is Blake defending Blake would be a problem for each team, but I don't know. I mean, I think they have weapons across the board, and I think this is comparable. I mean, it's a younger backcourt, but it's probably a more athletic backcourt, and it's been just as effective.
And they're faster, right? I mean, Bub and Jalen are faster than Nelly and Jamarius. So, if nothing else, you have speed guarding those guys. You know what I mean? Like you might not be able to shut everything down. You might not be as old or as smart as them, but you're faster than them. And then Zach Austin guards. I don't know. How would you do the defensive assignments? Would you have Zach Austin on Greg Elliott or Zach Austin on Blake Hinson?
I think you would probably try to get him on Hinson and see what he can do. I mean, just try to bother him as best you can with an athlete.
But then you have like Blake Hinson guarding Greg Elliott.
Yeah, there's not a good answer there.
Yeah, because I would probably prefer to have Austin on Hinson on both ends of the court, to be honest. But yeah, I mean, it would be interesting. It would be interesting because this team, I mean, that team had a lot of guys who could score. There's no question, but this team just feels deadlier. It feels more explosive. It feels more prolific. I mean, they've scored 90 and 88 in back-to-back games. I mean, we have to look back at last year's schedule, but off the top of your head, do you think there was a point in February or March? Do you think there was a point in March where they scored 90 and 88 in back-to-back games? Is there some obvious thing I'm forgetting about?
I mean, they scored a bunch against Syracuse at home, but I don't know if the other games around that were like a back-to-back situation.
Right. So I'm going to look up last year's schedule. Scroll. So, well, they scored 89 against Georgia Tech in the ACC tournament, and they scored 81 in the loss at Notre Dame, 99 against Syracuse. Okay, so yeah, all right, that team that that, that wasn't all in March, but that team certainly go. I don't know. Just feels like, I mean, they're certainly ending the season stronger than last year's team, right? Last year's team ended with the 2 losses, but ultimately there's not a lot to be gained from comparing the 2 teams, although it's a fun exercise. Homer Simpson has a question that inevitably is something we have to talk about. Says, I noticed last night's win didn't move us up any NCAA tournament polls, but it did move us up to a number 1 seed in the NIT, and they have us playing against Duquesne. That would be wild. It says, how many wins do we need to avoid that? What's your current projection, Jim, of what they need to do to make the tournament?
Man, I haven't checked an NIT projected bracket yet, so I haven't gone that far yet. But I still think like they need to win Saturday, but the thing is, I don't know what's going to happen next week because they can be anywhere from the 3 seed to the 7 seed in the ACC tournament, and that's a wide range of outcomes and possibilities. I mean, if you're the 7 seed, then you're going to have to play a 10 seed. You absolutely have to win that. But if you're a 3 seed, you don't get that extra game. I don't know. I mean, I kind of depends how it works out.
So where are they? What are they right now? Are they 5?
They're 5.
Okay. So right now they would play the winner of 12-13, which that's great. Right? That'd be beautiful, right? I mean, that would be, I think that would be tremendous if you could finish there, because 12 and 13 would be what, Notre Dame and Boston College? I mean, those 2 teams have combined to win 13 games all season. I mean, I would personally love that, wouldn't you?
Yeah, I mean, I can see like I think there's a scenario if Virginia and Clemson lose and Pitt wins, then they're the 3 seed. If one of them lose, they're the 4 seed. There's also a scenario where 4 teams can finish 11 and 9, and Pitt would drop all the way to the 7 seed.
Right.
So I don't know. Like, do they want the double bye? I think they do.
I've said I wouldn't want it. Like, give me that game. Give me that Tuesday game. You know what I mean? Or excuse me, Wednesday game. Give me the Wednesday game, whether it's the 5 seed, you're playing the winner of 12-13, 7 seed, you're playing the winner of 10-15. Like, give me a game against one of those teams in the bottom 6 of the conference. You know what I mean? Like, give me the game against trying to get back to the standings here. Like, what is it? 11 through 15 is who you could potentially face. Like, give me the game against Florida State. Give me the game against Georgia Tech, Notre Dame, Boston College, Miami, Louisville. Like, give me that game. Just to stack wins, and that's not to say they can't win on Thursday, whoever they would face, whether if they end up in a top 4 seed and they end up playing 5, 6 or 7 or 8 or 9, like, sure, they can win that game, but you might as well stack a win on Wednesday, ideally, and not blow it, get an extra win and then see what you can do on Thursday to try to make it into the semifinals on Friday. Personally, I think the single bye will be better. But because I don't know if I think you get more value out of an extra win than you get out of, oh, look, they finished in the top 4 of the ACC. You know what I mean? Like, I don't know if, like, in terms of perception, like, does it help you that much to have top 4 in the ACC more than having 22 versus 21 wins or 23 versus 22?
I'm not sure. I mean, like, ultimately, like, playing one of those bottom seeds, there's a lot to lose there. If you lose that game, you're done. So, I mean, like, I don't know if there's a ton to gain. There's a lot to lose. I guess that would be the argument against it. Like, if you were to blow it against Miami or Georgia Tech, then your season's over. So,
yeah, I mean, it operates on the idea that you're going to take care of business against a lower seed. I mean, obviously, I guess you are taking a bit of a risk there, but I think it's a risk worth taking to get that extra win, unless you think if you beat NC State, you're in. Do you think if they beat NC State, they're in, period, point blank, short of like blowing it against a bad team in the ACC tournament?
I think if they beat NC State, they do not get the double bye, and they just handle business against Georgia Tech or whatever. I think they're in.
Yeah. I just, like, what I keep saying is, like, do you think you can't convince me there are 34 or 35 teams playing better than Pitt right now. You know what I mean? I don't think you can convince me there are 25 teams that are better than Pitt right now with the way they've been playing. Really, what are they since the Duke game? Like 10-3?
Yeah.
In the last 13 games, the potential to finish the season on an 11-3 over their final 14 games. Like, there aren't many teams that are playing better than that. They've been doing it on the road. They've got signature wins. They've got some of the most exciting, you know what I mean? I don't know. I know the metrics always come into it, and I don't understand that enough to really comment on it. But I think if I'm sitting back and on the committee, you're not looking at a small sample size and saying, "Wow, these guys have only been playing well for 2 weeks." They've been playing well for the better part of like a month and a half. They're finishing strong. They've got good players. They'll be a threat to anybody they face. This doesn't mean they're going to win every game they play, but they're going to be a threat to anybody they face in the NCAA tournament. I think if they beat NC State and win one game in the ACC tournament, I think it would be a crime to keep them out at this point. But I'm not in the. Would it shock you? I mean, like what do you think would be the reason for keeping them out if they won this game, and then let's say they end up as the 5 seed and they beat whoever, Virginia Tech or somebody?
I don't know. I mean, there have been some certain cases lately of some ACC teams with 20+ wins getting left out. I think Clemson last year and maybe Wake Forest 2 years ago.
Yeah.
And I mean, it can happen, but I don't know. I mean, Pitt's like, if we're supposed to believe that the net rankings mean anything, Pitt's like 15 points higher than they were last year at this time. So I don't know. I mean, like, I know that Clemson team got left out because their net was like 70 something, even though they were 23-8 or whatever it was. So I don't know what the exact justification would be to keep them out, other than like unless it's like this crazy bubble. But I don't know. I was watching Seton Hall Villanova earlier because apparently that was an important game, and it seemed like Seton Hall was pulling ahead. And the interesting thing is, I think Villanova is going to be 17-13. Seton Hall is going to be 19-11, and Villanova is perceived as the better team. Seton Hall has 2 games on them in the conference and overall.
And like a virtual lock, right? I mean, is it up in the air?
I don't think I like that. They're 17-13, so I don't know how many games they can lose.
Right.
But apparently at least 14.
Right. Well, so Seton Hall won that game, right? Is that what you said? Yeah.
That's what it was whenever we started. They were up like 7.
Yeah, they won by 10. So I don't know. I think it's I mean, like, I think we talked before about like gaming the system and how all these ACC coaches are mad about the Big 12 gaming the system. Meanwhile, I mean, Pitt scheduled like that. You know, Pitt, they, as far as games they could schedule, they got themselves into the Brooklyn tournament. And they obviously scheduled the West Virginia game, but that was it. There are other 7 or 8 games. The 7 games they had control of outside of those, I mean, they scheduled down in every single one of them. The problem was the rest of the ACC maybe didn't necessarily follow suit and stack up a bunch of wins like Pitt did early on. Maybe that's what they needed the rest of the conference to do it, so that their wins look better once they get to the conference. I don't know. The other thing about the double bye, and Homer Simpson brought this up, and somebody else mentioned this to me earlier today about like, it might be the kind of thing that only really, it's confirmation bias or after the fact, or you view it in retrospect. But like Homer Simpson says, it always seems like when Pitt gets time off, they play worse. I mean, we'd have to look back at how they've done coming out of the off week, out of the bye. But like, there is something to be said for, they're going to play NC State on Saturday. Assuming they play well, maybe it's good to get back at it on Wednesday rather than waiting until Thursday. You know what I mean? I don't think you don't want them to play on Tuesday. But if they could get back at it a little bit sooner, I think there's something to be said for that, for maintaining momentum and just not having too much time off. I mean, I'm sure they're dealing with some bumps and bruises, but they seem to be pretty healthy. I don't think there's anything, glaringly obvious out of the top 8 guys. They all seem to be moving pretty well, so you don't really have too much of a rest situation. I don't know. Does that sway or hold any weight on your opinion of too much time off if they get the double bye?
Yeah, to this point, because I actually was like doing some research on some stuff earlier. This is Pitt's 11th season in the ACC. This will only be the 4th time they finish in the top half of the league standings. So they're usually playing on Tuesday. So I don't really remember all the byes. Like, so last year they had a single bye and won. 2016, I think they played Syracuse like on Wednesday and they won. That was like a single bye. Then the 2014, they made a run that year, actually.
Well, I think even just like looking at in season, right? So like this year they had the Duke game at home, and then they had a week off, and then they lost to Syracuse.
They had, like those,
but then
like,
the flip side,
those Christmas break games, I guess. But like that's like the same thing every year. They always have a week off and look sluggish.
Well, that was in January, the Duke to Syracuse run. But then they went to NC State and then had a week off and went to Virginia and they won that game. So I don't know if that doesn't necessarily back up the case of having too much extra time. I don't know. Like I said, I think it's one of those things you sort of you have confirmation bias, you decide sort of after the fact, well, they had too much time off, or well, they got extra time off. I mean, you kind of you judge it in retrospect. Cole LaRocca says, give me the number 4 seed with a game against Wake Forest or Clemson in the quarterfinals. If they win that game, they would be in. Yeah, I think if they win in the quarterfinals, all right, don't blow it against NC State. Win a game on Thursday, whether it's because you got the double bye or because you won on Wednesday, I think they're in. Unless there's some crazy upsets that come along and you're playing you're playing Boston College on Thursday or something like that. But would you agree with that? Beat NC State and win on Thursday, whether it comes with a Wednesday win or not, they should be in, right?
I think so too. I mean, the only thing I'm worried about for this team is if they get into like a 4 or 5 game and it's against Clemson and they can't beat Clemson.
Sports cliche, Jim. Sports cliche. It's hard to beat a team 3 times.
It's
hard to beat a team 3 times.
It's 14 at this point.
It's hard to beat a team 3 times in the same season.
I don't know.
Beat a team 3 times in the same season, Jim. Come on. Sports cliche. You know this.
I mean, so those 10-3 the past 13 games, the 2 games they looked the worst were against Clemson and Wake. So I know you can't beat a team 3 times.
They also beat Wake Forest.
They did
in a game where they played pretty well and had a comeback. Beating a team 3 times in the same season. Come on, Jim. This is like a sports cliche of all sports cliches. I'm going to go back and look through when Jamie Dixon would face like Syracuse in the Big East tournament and how he would do in those games. After playing him twice,
pretty well, yeah.
But I would say Clemson doesn't want to see Pitt in the ACC tournament because it's hard to beat a team 3 times. Syracuse probably is afraid of Pitt too in the ACC tournament because they don't want to have to face them, beat them a 3rd time. Now, this doesn't apply to Pitt playing Louisville in the ACC tournament. Pitt would absolutely want to play Louisville in the ACC tournament and potentially NC State. If they win this game on Saturday, I'm sure Pitt would not be worried about beating a team 3 times. But I mean, it would be interesting to have some rematches there. Get Clemson again, get Wake Forest again. Although, who would you want to see less of those 2? I think I would want to see Wake Forest less because they're just so good. Well, Clemson's really good offensively too. So I don't know. Is which one of those 2, if you could pick one of those 2 teams?
I think it's Clemson just because PJ Hall's so good, and I don't really think Pitt has a great answer for him. And then if you have Girard going, I mean, I think they're a tough match. And like I said, they honest to God have not beaten Clemson since 2014.
I know. We've talked about this a million times. I know.
It's just a bad matchup for them. So I don't know. I mean, a lot of Wake Forest, their metrics, they're very good at home. Wake Forest is very good at home, and I don't know. I don't know if that carries up to DC. If it was at the Greensburg Coliseum, I'd be worried. But now that it's in DC this year,
that's true. That's true. They've lost these last. They're 0-3 since the court storming, right?
Yeah.
And I think we're all 3 games on the road. Do you know? I'll look at Wake Forest schedule real quick.
Was Georgia Tech, was that at home last night?
I don't know. I'm trying to yeah, that was Georgia Tech was a home game. That's right. Notre Dame and Virginia Tech were both road games. Last night was a home game. So it's one of the rare times that Wake Forest that's their first home loss all season, right?
Yeah.
Because they were undefeated when they hosted Pitt and then they beat Duke the next game. So I don't know. I would like Wake Forest is really good offensively. You're right about PJ Hall. The downside of Clemson is you have to hear the announcer say Joseph Girard because for some reason they insist on calling him Joseph, and that really bugs me. I can't really explain it, and I think that's how he's listed in their media guide. It must be what he wants to be called, but I'm not calling him that. I'm going to call him Joe Girard. And if he played to Pitt, if he had come to Pitt as a transfer, I would have called him Joe as well. And it just gets on my nerves hearing the Joseph. So I got a lot of reasons for Pitt not to play Clemson, but I don't know. I'm not sure. It seems like there's a lot of scenarios, right? There's probably like 6 or 7 teams they could potentially play in their first ACC tournament game, right? I mean,
if they could be 4 or 5 different seeds, then yeah,
right.
There's so many combinations.
Everybody's moving around. Let's see. Colby Davis says, I don't understand how Pitt didn't move up after winning last night. I think talking about the net rankings, some of it is, did you move up or move down? Some of it is, did the teams around you move up or move down? So, I mean, Pitt stayed at 44. Trying to see.
The complaint last night was St. John's moved up after beating a 4-win DePaul team.
Right. Oh, yeah. They moved up 4 spots, 38 to 34. Texas Tech moved up 42 to 35. So that was a big jump that's going to make an impact. A lot of these other teams dropped, though. A lot of the teams right around Pitt. Wake Forest dropped 10 spots. TCU went down. Washington State. But I mean, it's all, some of it, Nevada jumped 8 spots. Some of it is you moving, and some of it is other teams moving around and moving you, right? We always talk about this with recruiting rankings. Wow, Pitt could jump to here or there, but you got to realize there are other teams around. It's not just you have this number, you are, rated at, 0.72, and that's just it. Everybody's in these you're number 41, you're number 42, you're number 43, and if other teams move, that kind of affects where you go or if you don't move. So I would guess that was part of it. Plus the fact that, what was last night? It was a quad 4 win, right? I don't think Florida State was a quad 3 at home, was it?
I don't think. Yeah, I mean, yeah. I didn't expect a big move. I guess I think there's just people annoyed that St. John's moved.
Yeah. And I think every time you see Pitt win and play well, you want to think there's going to be some fallout from that. There's going to be some impact. Joe Lunardi's going to move them up, or they're going to climb in the net rankings, or they're going to this, they're going to that. And it just doesn't always happen. And Colaraca follows up and says a quad 3 win on Saturday won't move the needle much either. And he's probably right. I mean, you're probably not going to, they're not going to end up in the top 25 of the net rankings, right? Maybe if they win the ACC tournament, right? I mean, they're not going to make some big jump. What they need to do is hold steady, try and climb into, getting into the 30s would be good, right? And that should be viable, I would think. What are they, 44?
Yeah, I guess the magic number is nobody below 37 has ever been left out, something like that. I think that's the number, the mythical number you're trying to chase.
So if they could get a Thursday win, a win in the quarterfinals against, say, a Clemson or Wake, they should have a chance, right, to climb into that range. Could they make up 7 spots in a week?
They did, I think, in this past week. They did.
Yeah, they went up 5 after the Boston College game, right? Yeah. So that's possible. This NC State game being at home is not going to help them as much as if it had been on the road, but they could climb. So maybe that's the target. We'll see if they can get into the top 37. Just keep winning. Just keep winning and playing well. Colby Davis says Providence got a quad 3 win and moved up. Also, St. John's got a quad 4 win and moved in as the last team in. So, yeah, you mentioned St. John's. Peninsula P wants to know, does anyone know the actual NCAA tournament selection criteria? I feel like they've said a million different things. Oh, it's who's playing well at the end, who's doing this, who's got the best resume, who's got the best strength of schedule. It's a combination of factors, right? When they're handing out the at-large bids, they're looking for the most deserving teams. Is that how would you sum it up? If your thought on the tournament selection committee?
I think they have the chairman on after selection Sunday every year, and I think he says we try to get the 68 best teams, and there's so many data points. I think that's part of it. I think your quad 1 wins and stuff like that, and they say total body of work, but then they also say, well, this team's been playing well, and they were missing a guy with injury. So I think they take into a lot of different things, and that's we get so focused on everyone's talking about well, they just got moved up to the last team in. There's no last team in right now. That's just some guy's projection of the last team.
Yeah.
In. There's no actual mark that these teams moved up to last night. It's just a guess right now. So I don't think there's a complete way of doing it, but I think in college basketball, I like that there's people in a room talking about it. I think that's a good thing to have.
Yeah. Maybe Jeff Capel, I don't know if he had his radio. I'm sure he had his radio show tonight. I don't know if he's going to talk to us tomorrow. Or maybe just after the game on Saturday. He should spend all his time talking about very specifically and very intentionally talking about the injuries to Ishmael Leggett and maybe if Jalen Lowe was hurt early in the season, to talk about like, Ishmael Leggett was this hurt. He could only do this. He could only do that. He couldn't shoot his shoulder, blah, blah, blah. And Jalen Lowe had, because didn't he say at some point that Lowe was hurt early in the season, was dealing with, did I make that up? Did I imagine that? Do you
No,
have
that
any
was
memory of that?
No, that was like kind of when he started playing well. It might have been after the Duke game. I think someone asked him, like, "Are you surprised?" Like, no, we knew he's a good player. He was just a little banged up at the beginning of the season, and like I think I like looked at Noah and I was like, "Huh?
Yeah,
Like,
right.
when did this happen?"
So like he needs to hammer those points. You know what I mean? Because like right now, what does Pitt have to do? Pitt has to sort of explain away the Missouri loss, to be sure, that first Clemson loss to a certain extent, and maybe even the Florida loss. So go really hard talking about all these injuries that you've been dealing with and how some of these key players have been hurt, but now that you've got them healthy, you've gone 11-3 over your final 14 games. Like, needs to really hammer on those injuries, I think. L421 says, I think they'll need 22 or 23 wins. With 23 wins, I'm feeling pretty confident, but the committee is not too high in the ACC, so hold your breath even still. So, I mean, they're 20 now. Yeah, I would think 23 gets them in, right? Because that's beating NC State and winning 2 games in the ACC tournament. And I mean, like, especially if, you get the double bye, because winning 2 games gets you into the championship game. So
that's
you
should, for
should,
Carolina. Yeah.
right. Yeah. 23 wins with the kind of wins that you would need to get to the ACC title game. I would say yes. 23 wins with the single bye still means you probably get a pretty quality win, potentially a quad 2 win, I guess, on Thursday. That I would think so too. So I would say 23 wins is pretty close to a lock.
Yeah, I would say. However, either single bye or double bye.
Yeah, right. Because it gets you a win on Thursday. I think that's what I'm coming back to. I think this is going to be my thing I'm going to repeat a lot between now and next week, is that they have to beat NC State and then win on Thursday. Whether that's their first game or their second game in the ACC tournament, they have to win on Thursday. That's what I'm going to, that's from now on, because people keep asking this stuff. That's what I'm going to say. They got to win on Thursday. You good with that?
Yeah, I think that's a good one. Yeah.
Good. Paul Sebastian wants to know, would the season be considered a step back if they don't make it? I don't think so. You?
No, we talked about this last week. If they do all these things we're saying they do and they still get left out, they had a good year.
Yeah.
That's just like numbers working against them. There's nothing they could have done differently. I mean, they've played so well since January 20th. If they get to 22 wins and get left out, I can't say that's a bad season. I mean, it's not.
Yeah. I mean, I already feel like it's a good season. I mean, the NC State game pending, that could put a tarnish on it if they lose that game. But I already feel like it's a good season. I think getting to, I mean, as we've said a lot of times, I think getting to 20 wins is the mark of a good season. I think, the development that we've seen, it's been a fun season too. And there were some parts that weren't very fun. They were 1-5 in the ACC. That wasn't very good. But the last month and a half, what was that date? You just said January 20th. I mean, like, they've been really, really good. They've been one of the best teams in the conference, one of the best teams in the country. They've got one of the most exciting players in the conference, one of the most exciting players in the country. They've got a bunch of guards that play really well. Every now and then you get something fun out of Federico. He had back-to-back baskets last night. One was a fast break he scored on. The other one was a putback. I mean, like, it's hard for me to feel too negative about this, even if they end up missing the tournament, which I actually don't think they're going to do. I think they're going to make the tournament. Even if they end up missing it, it'll be disappointing, but it's hard for me to feel like it's, all a waste. I'm just not all or nothing like that. I think there is this middle ground where you can look at it and be like, yeah, I mean, they had a really good season. And I think they're already there. Just don't blow it against NC State, right?
Yeah, I mean, I look at it like this. They had 3 really bad weeks. They had lost to Missouri and Clemson. They had 3 separate occasions where they lost back-to-back games. Otherwise, they've been 20-4. Like, they just had, don't lose to Syracuse twice, don't lose to Missouri, and we're not even talking about the bubble. Like, they're in.
Yeah, and it was like an 18-day stretch. where they lost to Syracuse, Carolina, Duke, and Syracuse, and beat Louisville in between that. So, I mean, they lost 2, beat Louisville, lost 2. Outside of that, and I know you can't do that. You can't say other than that, but other than that, and like you said, I mean, they had the back-to-back losses, the Missouri and the Clemson game, but I mean, they've been really good. And I think there is a segment of the Pitt fans who are going to be there is a segment of Pitt fans that are going to be disappointed if they miss the NCAA tournament. But I'm sorry, this comment just came in, and I don't know. Do you see the chat screen, Jim?
No.
Or do you only see it when I bring up the chat, the comments?
Just the comments. Like
okay.
Yeah.
So I think somebody's lost. And I skipped over a couple comments. We'll get to it in a second, but I'm excited. The upcoming Soccer World Cup tournament will be held in the United States. 48 national teams will arrive. In your opinion, what are the most beautiful soccer stadiums in the United States? Jimbo, got anything here?
Well, did you notice, like, for the World Cup, like, they can't call the stadiums by their name, like, because of, like, sponsorship rights by FIFA? So, like, MetLife Stadium in New York, it's just going to be called New York Stadium.
Oh, really?
Yeah,
oh,
like, and that's how it is for all the stadiums in the World Cup when it's here.
Huh? How many stadiums do they have like active? I have no base of knowledge on this at all. Do you know how many stadiums they have active for this? Are they all in the New York area, or are they all over the country?
Oh no, it's all over. Like, it's a joint. Like, it's Canada, Mexico, United States. It's like all over. So,
all right.
It's not in Pittsburgh though.
No,
it's not at Pittsburgh Stadium.
For short, you could just call it Pitt Stadium, right? I mean,
it rolls off the tongue.
It's a really look. I think Highmark is a really nice soccer stadium. It's the only soccer stadium I've ever been to. But thank you, sir or madam, for watching the live stream, I guess. Anyway, here we go. L421 agrees with me. Clemson is not beating Pitt 3. Well, L421 says Clemson is not beating Pitt 3 times in a row. I mean, they have, right? I mean, as Jim is, very anxious to tell us, they have beat Pitt more than 3 times in a row. What we're saying here, L421, is that Clemson is not beating Pitt 3 times in the same season. That's the distinction to make. He says, or she says, they're good, but we match up decently, and Pitt will have the desperation and the fire lit under them. I think they had desperation and fire when they went to Clemson. What was that, last week or 2 weeks ago or whenever that was? And that was a game they probably should have won, right? They had a double-digit lead in the first half, right? Yeah. And because then they went on a big slump and let Clemson back into it. I mean, there's certainly a team they can play with, and Wake Forest is a team that Pitt can play with as well. They beat them at the Peterson Event Center. So I don't think there's anybody. I mean, there's nobody in the ACC they can't beat. North Carolina is probably the toughest challenge, right? Would you say North Carolina is? I mean, obviously Carolina is the best team in the conference, but is there anybody who stands out to you as being tougher matchup for Pitt than them?
No, I mean, I think if they were to play Duke again, Duke would probably be a little angry, and
and they're also really good. I mean,
they're also really good, and they killed Pitt earlier in the year. They killed Pitt last year in the ACC tournament, so like that's a tough matchup for them. Filipowski has, even the game Pitt beat them, like he's killed them all 3 times. So that's anyone with a really good center is a tough matchup for Pitt, and both Duke and Carolina have one, and so does Clemson. So
was it the ACC tournament game where Filipowski like rolled his ankle early and still came back and scored like 30, or was that the game in the regular season? You remember that?
No, that was in the ACC tournament.
Was that the ACC? And he still came back and dominated them. I mean, Pitt needed. I think Blake Hinson set a record for the most made threes without a miss. The ACC record for the most made threes without a miss in a single game in that one. So they needed like a historic performance to beat Duke. So I actually, all right. So would you rather Pitt play Duke or Carolina?
It's interesting because last year they were actually pretty good against Carolina. They beat them twice, but that different teams. There's no Burton and Cummings around, so I don't know. I'd like to see them get another chance at Carolina, because if I recall in that game, it was one of those games where they were up 6-0 and they should have been up 16-0. Like
absolutely.
Carolina could not buy a shot. They were playing great defense, and like they would just not do anything every possession. And it was like at the under 8 or under 16 timeout, it was like 6-2.
Yep.
There's no
Yeah,
reason.
they could never put him away, even though
Yeah.
Carolina was leaving the door open for. I mean, like I don't think Baycott is he's not the same kind of challenge that like Filipowski is or PJ Hall is or Quentin
No.
Post. He's not an easy challenge, but he's a different kind of challenge. RJ Davis, I forget how Pitt tried to defend RJ Davis in the past. I mean, I would guess at this point, Bub Carrington would draw that assignment. I don't know. Would you go Carrington or Zach Austin?
I'm trying to think what they did in that first game. That game was like they lose by like 70-57, and I can't remember if they had Leggett on them. I don't know if that was when Leggett was still a starter.
Yeah, that's a good question.
I kind of forgot how that game went down.
That was a long time ago.
Other than they lost 70-57.
That's pretty good recall on the score, though. I mean, I had forgotten what the score was. I just remember that it was a loss. I'm trying to scroll through the box scores real quick to see who started in that game. Yeah, Leggett was still in the starting lineup at that point. Lowe actually moved into the starting lineup the next game because Leggett was hurt. So Leggett was in the starting lineup for that game and played 32 minutes for the Carolina game. So I would guess he did. I think Bub could take him on. I mean, I think Bub with his length, I think he's been really good defensively. I think Bub could give RJ Davis a challenge. I mean, it's not going to be easy, but I would like to see that too. Just we've already seen Duke twice. I'd like to see Pitt get another shot at Carolina. Homer Simpson says, last night made me understand why they don't play Guillermo Diaz-Graham over Federico. Diaz-Graham is so much better, but he just can't stop getting into foul trouble. If he can work on that, he can be a great player. Well, I mean, that was like both centers. I think they
were both in foul trouble.
Yeah, Guillermo had 3 in the first half, and Federico had 2. I think when it ended, they both had 4. I mean, I think that was a matchup thing as much as anything. That doesn't happen every game. But I think just like going against that kind of length, and it was, and just they called 34 fouls in that game. I mean, there were a lot of fouls called between the two teams, and so I think that's but I keep saying 34. It's 36. There were 36 fouls called. Because you know what? The box score, they list fouls and then fouls drawn. And so they don't count
the
technicals as fouls drawn. So it was actually 36 fouls called, which is even more ridiculous. We didn't need 36 fouls called in that game. But when you have 36 fouls called, you're going to end up with, guys are going to have a lot of fouls. And it just so happened it was Guillermo and Federico and Bub. Bub had 4 fouls as well. He's toyed with foul trouble. He's gotten in foul trouble a few times. The Virginia Tech game is the other one that sort of comes to mind. Peninsula P says, I think Pitt has a chance to win the ACC tournament if they get a 4 seed. I think they have a chance to win the ACC tournament no matter what, because I think they're that good. I just think they're probably going to have an off game. You know what I mean? I'm guessing they'll have an off game in the tournament. You just want them to get a win on Thursday before it happens. But I mean, I don't know. Do you feel better or worse about their chances based on the seed they get?
Not necessarily. I don't. It's been hard for me to think of their ACC tournament path because they really need to beat NC State. Then I'll start worrying about what they need to do in the ACC tournament. But I think they're good enough. I think they have good enough shooters to go on a run or win the whole thing. I mean, it's probably going to come down to Duke or Carolina. That's what very well could be the championship game. But if one of the teams going to mess up the script, I think Pitt has as good of a shot as any.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, they can score. If you can score, you can have a lot of success there. Paul Sebastian wants us to switch to football here for the final 5 minutes. Says, switching to football, does spring practice determine the starters for the fall or no? In your honest opinion, what does spring practice accomplish for the coaches and players? The biggest thing, Jim, I mean, and I think you'd probably agree, and it's particularly relevant this year, is if you're learning a new offense or a new defense. I mean, it's installing the offense, it's installing the defense, it's learning about, how you're going to play. And there's installation that happens every year, but that's especially true this year with a brand new offense coming in, a brand new offensive staff, and something that's drastically different from what they've done in the past. I mean, that's the biggest thing, more than determining depth charts or starters or anything like that. I think the biggest thing, especially this spring, is getting that new offense installed.
No, I would agree with that. I mean, for the most part, like I'm not going to sugarcoat spring a lot. Like, say if like Pitt was coming off a good season and a lot of the coaching staff was still around, like spring football doesn't mean much to a guy like Gavin Bartholomew. Like he's gonna like be at 50%. Like they're not gonna have him running around trying to get hurt. I mean, I think football has its value in, just now because there's a lot of transfer portal guys, and now they have to see how this coaching staff works and see how it works whenever they get to training camp. And there's so many mid-year enrollees, so I think it's really good for newcomers to kind of get a feel before training camp. I mean, but at the start of these position battles happen now. I mean, I don't think for the most part you're not going to like determine the starter sometime in the next month, but you're going to give yourself a pretty good idea going into the fall at least.
Right. And the depth chart for August for training camp is going to be set, to some extent based on what happens now. You know what I mean? I think that's the biggest thing for the two deep. What's the most interesting position battle you think on this team? And talk, as we talk about starters and things like that, and understanding that it's not going to be decided this spring. What do you think is the most interesting position battle?
Both starting cornerback positions.
Yeah,
because I don't know who is actually the favorite right now. I mean,
yeah,
it's kind of wide open. I think that's what makes it interesting. But I mean, obviously, quarterback's one you can point to. I mean, there's some like depth battles, like the number 2 running back. Like who's going to get carries besides? Like I think that's interesting, and who's going to be on the field with the receivers? Can one of the Western Carolina guys knock off one of the 3 incumbents? I don't know. I mean, obviously, defensive line is. Yeah, there's a lot going on there. So I think in your camp report today, you were talking about middle linebacker or linebacker a little bit.
Yeah, the linebackers. I think defensive tackle is one of the most interesting, partially because I don't know who the starters are going to be, partially because it's really important that they get some guys in there, partially because they don't have anybody returning. You know what I mean? They don't have any. I mean, they have players returning, but they don't have any returning starters. They really don't have any returning 2 deep guys. When you figure that the 2 deep last year was Tyler Bentley, Devin Danielson, David Green, and DeAndre Jules, and some combination thereof. You don't have any of those guys back. So, I mean, it's a whole new group. I think Sean Fitzsimmons could be good. I think Elliot Donald. I mean, the time is now. Nakai Johnson moved inside from defensive end. The time is now for him as well. Brought in Nick James as a transfer. Isaiah Neal's ready after redshirting last year. I mean, there's some guys there that I'm interested to see, but I don't know who's going to be the man and if he's going to really, produce anything, or if that position is going to be productive, because it really wasn't last year. Football Hawk wants to know how many starters are back from last year on offense and defense. So, I mean, if you just talk the end of the season, right? You got the quarterback, the running back, 2 receivers, tight end.
Oh, Gavin wasn't playing at the end of the season. Carter Johnson.
Come on, Jim.
He's gone, man.
Oh, God. Well, fine. Starters from the starters from the Notre Dame game, then. I mean, like, what the hell, Jim? God, why are you doing this? We're almost done. Why are you trying to? Why are you sending this out? We're just going to count numbers, and you have to go and be a giant. So that's 5. And then the offensive line, I mean, you have Terrence Moore and Branson Taylor and Ryan Baer. BJ Williams did start games. Jason Collier did start games. Let's call it 9.5, 10 and a half starters back. That's more than I would have thought, actually. I felt like they had more open starting jobs on offense.
I mean, I guess it feels that way because, like, some of the, like, Macinsalvis didn't really play for 2 months. Like, he was a starter, but, like, he's now, Ryan Baer was in there. So, like, he's now a returning starter. But, I mean, like, the only, like, real significant piece, like, it's like, what, Cradle and Means.
Yeah.
Like, pretty much.
You're right. Yeah,
or Carter Johnson if you're,
I'm not. And then defensively, I mean, the tackles, like we mentioned, the 2 tackles, one starting outside linebacker is gone, right? And Kamara, and Gully Kamara, both corners. So that's 5. So
Simon's gone too.
Yeah, that's true. That's true. So 6. So they returned 5 starters on defense. So, I mean, that's where the biggest holes are. And I think we've known that, corner is a spot they've got to fill after losing MJ Devonshire and AJ Woods and Marquez Williams. The defensive tackles we just talked about, those 2 linebackers. I guess I don't think about the linebackers as much because I feel like there are a lot of guys who played a lot last year. Brandon George played a lot. Solomon Shields. Kyle Lewis played a decent amount. Braylon Lovelace. And those other guys who were freshmen last year. I mean, there's a lot of guys that are back. They just maybe weren't all starters at the end of the season. So roughly, what do we just count? Maybe 14 starters returning, 14 or 15.
Yeah, plus a kicker and
a punter. They lost the long snapper though. So
are we sure they want the punter?
We'll see.
Yeah.
I don't know. I feel like I feel like they've looked at other punters. I don't know if they've offered any or they've tried to get any, but we'll see. Maybe the transfer portal will provide another option there. But all right, well, they had practice today. They had practice again on Friday. And then, of course, the Pitt basketball game on Saturday. We'll have lots of coverage, Jim, at Panther-Lair.com. Everybody knows that website by now, Panther-Lair.com, Pittsburgh.rivals.com to get your Pitt sports coverage. And then right here, youtube.com/Panther-Lair.com. Like this video and subscribe to our YouTube channel so you don't miss anything like these live streams. It's a lot of fun as always. Thanks to everybody who jumped in the comments tonight with the chat screen, the comments and questions. Jim, thanks to you for your time. Hope everybody had a great Wednesday. We'll be back with another Morning Pit tomorrow, where I'll say this before we go. The Morning Pit tomorrow, you'll listen to it or watch it or whatever, and the first minute you'll either love it or hate it. I think we'll have a lot of people turning it off in the first minute. I hope. Well, I don't hope, but I mean, I don't know. So that's a little bit of a teaser that the first minute could be the worst thing you've ever seen. And it very well could be. So we'll check that out in the morning. But anyway, thanks for tuning in tonight. We appreciate everybody. Have a great rest of your evening. We'll talk to you tomorrow for the Morning Pit. And then our next live stream will be after whenever Pitt's next ACC tournament game is. So have a good night.